Okay, part 9 of eukaryotic microbes, slide 17 of lecture 17, arthropods. Arthropods are animals. Arthropods have an external exoskeleton. And probably the most obvious kinds of arthropods that we come into contact with are insects. Insects like mosquitoes and fleas, and then we'll look at some other kinds of arthropods, arachnids like ticks and mites. So the first idea about arthropods is that they are very important as vectors of transmission. We've already seen a number of examples where flies and mosquitoes are important vectors for our helminth parasites, but I'm sure you can think of a whole number of diseases that are transmitted by things like mosquitoes and then also things like ticks. So we have to separate out this first idea of mechanical versus biological transmission as vectors. A mechanical vector is simply picking up from point A and putting down on point B. So for example, the one that's always given is that there's dog poop in the environment, and you are enjoying your sandwich at your picnic, and a housefly, a fly, lands on the dog poop. It walks around on the poop, picks up particles on its feet, and then it flies off, lands on your sandwich, deposits those particles, and it's done its job of moving material from point A to point B. But really, you don't need the fly itself. Anything that touches the poop and then touches the sandwich is doing the same job. It's a mechanical vector. A biological vector is when the arthropod is an essential part of the life cycle of the parasite. A good one is the malaria parasite, Plasmodium. Anopheles, mosquitoes, are the only mosquito that can transmit this disease because throughout a very long period of time, the malaria parasite has formed this relationship with the Anopheles mosquito, and it has to be picked up by this particular mosquito because inside the mosquito, the malaria parasite has to complete part of its life cycle. Those trypanosomes that cause sleeping sickness, they are transmitted only by the tsetse fly. And again, they require the tsetse fly because they need to perform some parts of their life cycle inside the fly. When we talk about vectors and transmission by insects and arachnids, we go back to the idea of reservoirs. So rats, for example, rats and plague, or indeed those prairie dogs and the plague. The prairie dogs are a reservoir for the plague, but a human being passing past the burrow of a groundhog isn't going to get infected. We need the flea to bite the groundhog, get the bacteria, and then we need the flea to bite the human and pass it on. So one idea about controlling many diseases is if you can control the vectors, you can control the disease. If you can control the reservoir, you can control the disease. So we have our groundhogs, we have our fleas, we have our humans. If we kill the groundhogs, that's the disease gone. But if we kill the fleas, that means the humans won't get infected. Or if we can control the hosts, we can prevent the people from going near the groundhogs and the fleas in the first place. We can then control the infection. So our first arthropod that we can take a look at are mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are insects. You can tell they're insects because they have wings and they have 6 legs. Mosquitoes are very important for disease transmission because of their mechanism of feeding. So, we talked about the skin before. The skin is a defense. It's pretty tough stuff. Bacteria and other parasites on the surface of our skin have a very hard time getting through the skin and into our tissues. We talked about the idea of having to sterilize, say, a needle or sterilize a scalpel because it's going to penetrate our natural defenses and contact our tissues. And that's exactly what a mosquito does with its feeding mouthparts. It directly penetrates our defenses and comes into contact with our tissues, so it is the perfect delivery mechanism for many of these diseases. One interesting interesting fact about mosquitoes is it's only females who are biting you. In fact, the males don't even have mouthparts. They use protein and iron found in blood to make their eggs. So, a mosquito bites a human or bites another animal, and anything in the blood is taken up into the mosquito. The mosquito can then fly around and it can land on the next person or land on the next person and then inject them with the bacteria or the parasite or whatever it is that they are moving around. And for then many of these diseases, the parasite completes some kind of change, some kind of life cycle step occurs inside the mosquito. So yellow fever, dengue fever, West Nile encephalitis, malaria, all transmitted by mosquitoes. Fleas. Fleas are also insects. They have 3 pairs of legs. Fleas can jump up to 30 centimeters, and they are biting animals. So if there is bacteria in the flea's mouth and it bites you, then the bacteria gets into the person. And once again, that bite is able to penetrate past our defensive mechanism of our skin. So, the plague, Yersinia pestis. Fleas are a vital component of spreading plague. So the fleas pick up the bacteria when they bite an infected host, maybe that reservoir of groundhogs. And the bacteria has a clever mechanism. Clever for the bacteria, very bad for the flea, and also bad for the thing the flea is biting. The bacteria gets into the digestive tract of the flea and it multiplies to very large amounts. And through this multiplication mechanism, it blocks the flea's digestive tract. Oops. So the flea begins to starve because it has its digestive tract blocked. Then, if an animal or a human comes into contact with the flea, that starving flea jumps on them and it kind of bites them extra hard, and it bites them repeatedly because it's starving. So the bacteria has increased the chances of being passed on by making the fleas starve, so that when they get on the human, they keep on biting, and almost certainly the bacterium, if it is in the flea, it is now in the human. Fleas can live for months in vacant buildings, and as soon as a suitable host enters, they all start flying up, or not flying, they jumping up and biting. So, insects, probably, if you're going to think of what an arthropod is, have an insect in mind, but arthropods are also very important. Probably the most common arthropod that you might think about are spiders. An insect has a different body plan to an arachnid. An arachnid includes ticks and spiders. 6 legs in an insect, 8 legs in an arachnid, a head, a thorax and an abdomen in an insect, just a head and an abdomen, or a cephalothorax and an abdomen in an arachnid. Arachnids lack wings, they lack antennae. So, when we're talking about transmission of diseases, probably number 1 on the list are ticks. I hate ticks. They are gross, nasty animals. They live in low vegetation and they kind of crawl up on grass and they just hang there. And then when the animal host walks past, they brush against the grass, they brush against the tick, and the tick is now on the animal. The tick burrows into the skin with its mouth parts and it just feeds. The body will swell larger and larger. So ticks are feeding on blood, and ticks have all kinds of tricks up their sleeve too. Their saliva can have or contain anesthetic chemicals so that you don't realize that the tick is biting, because the tick needs to stay attached for quite a long period of time it wants to stay attached for a long period of time to get a full meal. And clearly, if you knew you had a tick, if you could feel a bite, you would want to know what caused it, and if you saw a tick, you would do your best to get rid of that tick. If the tick can bite you and you don't feel it, then you won't try and get rid of it. So some things that are transmitted by ticks: Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Rickettsia is a bacterium. The saliva of some ticks can produce tick paralysis, maybe because of that anesthetic property or some other chemical, particularly in young children. And it's just what it sounds like. The tick bites and the host is paralyzed. Maybe it's another mechanism that ticks have to prevent being removed. If you can just suck the blood of an unresponsive host, then you can eat for as long as you want. Typically, when you remove the tick, the kid gets better. Lyme disease, another bacteria that can be transmitted by ticks. Up to 20% of Lyme disease cases can cause lasting symptoms. So this isn't just a case of getting sick with Lyme disease. Many nasty side effects: arthritis, cognitive difficulties, chronic fatigue, sleep disturbances. In the case of Lyme disease, the tick must be attached for quite a long period of time, 36 to 48 hours, to effectively transmit the bacteria. So if you do ever go walking in an environment where you have the potential to be bitten by a tick, check for ticks. Fortunately, they like to burrow into crevices, so you have to check in places where you can't typically see them. There's other interesting things about ticks. The fact that ticks can have so many diseases, yet are not affected by those diseases. there's some ideas that ticks have an unusual immune system, that all of these bacteria that are inside the tick can't actually hurt the tick itself. Our last arthropod is a mite. These are once again arachnids, and you can see here here's a picture of a Dermodex mite, and our Dermodex mites are actually microscopic. So far we've looked at things that are vectors, i.e. they move other diseases around. In this case, the arthropod itself is the cause of the disease. They live on skin and they burrow. They burrow into your skin, typically at the base of hairs. They live unnoticed in hair follicles or oil-producing glands. In fact, you have them right now living in your face. If you were to pluck out some of your eyebrow hairs, put them on a microscope and look, you would almost certainly see these tiny little mites wriggling around. These mites don't generally cause disease themselves. They can trigger asthma. They can cause itching from where they burrow into the skin. This kind of mite that is kind of a symbiont. It is, maybe we could call it a commensal, in that the mite doesn't really harm us in any particular way, but it does benefit. Again, we don't notice really the mites that are living at the base of our hair follicles. But other mites like chiggers, they can attach and they will feed on the fluids within the skin cells, and they will then mount an immune response causing itching. Scabies can be caused by other mites. The mite burrows and lays eggs. The infestation of eggs and mites again leads to a much stronger immune response, and that leads to an angry rash and itching. So last slide, number 24. Note the basic difference between an insect and an arachnid. Presence of wings, presence of antenna, different numbers of legs, different body plan. You can tell the difference between an insect and an arachnid. Know the role of these insects in disease. Mosquitoes. Why are mosquitoes good vectors? They are good vectors because they penetrate our defenses. Many things are transmitted by mosquitoes: malaria, yellow fever, dengue fever, West Nile, encephalitis, and many more. Fleas. The plague, Yersinia pestis, is a particular concern when you think about fleas. And to remember their role. Remember the role of the bacteria, making those starving fleas, and starving fleas bite repeatedly, increasing the chances of transmitting the plague bacteria. Now, the role of these arachnids, ticks, have a whole number of different things that they spread around. Mites, again, lots of different kinds of mites. We have them living on our bodies right now. In fact, in general, even though we are in the Western world, even though we consider ourselves healthy, there's a good likelihood that somewhere in your body there are helminths wriggling around, there are protozoans wriggling around. All of these, there are fungi obviously in and on your body. So all of these eukaryotic microbes are in you and on you. So that's how I'll end this set of lectures. I mean, that's how I'll end the material for this week. Okay, take it easy.